Hey guys, this isn't going to be too in-depth here. It's just going to have a little comment per weapon, but this is mostly to get my thoughts down here. Everyone's going to have their different opinions and favourites, but I do have a 5 BC win with almost every weapon in the game, so hopefully I can provide some good insights. Dead Cells tier lists are pretty difficult. Some things are better on biomes, some are better on bosses, or they only work with other specific weapons or mutations. For example, the baseball bat is really good, but because Dracula has such high freeze, root and stun resistance, it isn't the best weapon against him. Even the best weapons have their weaknesses, but you don't have to fight Dracula, right? There are other routes to take. This tier list focuses on general consistency, damage, attack patterns, stuff like that. I've not just put my favourite weapons as S tier or anything, and I've focused on trying to be as objective as I can be. So yeah, I'm just going to get right into it. I'm probably just going to record all of this in one go, and just kind of comment on weapons as they come. Some weapons are going to be really quick here, if they're just a kind of a standard bonk weapon, you know, but some of them I might go in depth a little bit more into. So starting right at the start here, we're going with the rusted sword. It's going straight in F. Then Assassin's Dagger, it's decent, it suffers from targets not having a back, like Dracula Phase 2 and Mushrooms, but it's just a standard okay weapon. Put in B for now. I will rearrange these at the end maybe as well. So Bloodsword struggles to breach mobs, breach meaning to stun them. By itself it's not the best, but you can start getting some good DPS out of it. Once you get some blade items going, open wounds, stuff like that. Pop in B. The Pan, again it's kind of like the Assassin's Dagger, it struggles from like if mobs don't have a front, then you can't crit them at all. But just kind of a standard bonk weapon. Put in B. Panchaku is kind of the same. Honestly, Panchaku is a bit better than Pan, quite a bit better I'd say. Again, I might rearrange these because I'm looking at Pan now and it might go on C, but I feel like it is still like B is going to be standard. It's just going to be okay weapons. Alright, so next is Nail. Nail, I want to put an A instantly. It can really just kill mobs so quickly, you don't even need to stop to do it. The attack pattern is amazing, it's consistent, it's flexible. Has a couple downsides. On bosses, doesn't have the most damage. Early game can struggle on damage, especially like on lower BC, stuff like that. Going for crits often isn't the best for damage as well, just because of things moving around and stuff. Balance Blade, pretty consistent weapon. The attack pattern I'd say is maybe the best attack pattern in the game. If you have shoots an arrow forward as well, you can get a decent amount of burst damage on the attack. Sometimes if you're doing a lot of dodging in bosses as well, it can be hard to enable crits though. So I won't put an S tier, but definitely A. But it's like, yeah, it's pretty good. Twin Daggers, it's just kind of an okay weapon, not the best, it's decently quick. Not the best crit condition, first 2 attacks don't do that much damage either. Put in B for now. Rapier, really good, like that's an instant, like, I'd put this in S or A. It's got a really easy crit condition, really high damage, and yeah, I'm gonna put an S. Alright, next is Crowbar. Crowbar is okay, it does a decent amount of damage, especially early game, because there's quite a lot of bestial mobs early game. There's, I think, less just as you go on in the biomes, but the weapon's kind of inconsistent if you don't want to carry around an emergency door all the time. Decent damage though, put in B, just a standard weapon. Sadist stiletto, easy to get crits on with open wounds early game. Good attack pattern, locks you into a mutation though, right? Like, you kind of want to take open wounds with it unless you have like a bleed setup going like later on, which is easy enough to do. It's not got the best range, not got the best damage, but it's still pretty good there. Morning Star, it's just bad, isn't it? You can kind of do the thing where you extend the flail, you know, and tickle the mobs, but who wants to do that? It has really bad damage. It's only good on like really big target fights, right? Like if you want to do it with Giant and Phase 2 Dracula maybe. Otherwise, I'd probably put an F, honestly. For now. We'll see how we're looking at the end. Alright, next is Spite Sword. So for this, you're basically always pairing it with Face Flask, right? You're always pairing it with Face Flask and Vengeance. So some people might see this as a downside, because it takes up a skill slot and a mutation slot instantly, sorry. But this isn't even a downside, really. Face Flask Vengeance combo is so strong that it's just fine. It's just fine to do it. It does have a 3 attack combo, and it's a bit weird because the first 2 hits are strong, but the third is a kick, which is almost nothing, but it does a tiny stun, right? But yes, it's pretty strong. Put an A. King Sceptre. Honestly, it's like just usable. I would just put in D. It's really clunky to use. You can use it in biomes if you want, but it doesn't really have the best damage. It'll eventually kill things. It's just pretty annoying to use. Then when it comes to bosses, it's pretty funny trying to chase it, boop it on the head, and then you're just going to eventually get hit by abilities that you can't avoid when you're in the air. Yeah, it's just pretty clunky, right? Alright, next is Vampire Killer. To really make this weapon good, like really good, you need a quick trigger for fire, and it's going to be pretty damn good if you get that. Otherwise, yeah, if you don't have something like Firebrands and you're not critting consistently, then the normal damage versus the crit damage is quite a high difference. But I would still maybe put an A, just because it has, the crits are easy to get. Alright, Starfury. So this just got buffed recently, and its current state is actually pretty good. The delay between the melee attacks and the stars hitting is actually its biggest weakness. It can really tear through bosses though with the right setup. I'd put in B. Next, Queen's Rapier. So this is a weapon I kind of like, but it's just a bit clunky to use. I always expect it to have more range than it does. Mid damage, but overall it's kind of okay. Put in B. Hayabusa boots. So these aren't really that consistent of a weapon. It kind of has low damage without walls, and you really want to finish the weapon combo to do that damage with the pushback and stuff. It's not really ideal. I'm gonna put in C for now. If I compare it to like some of these weapons in B, I just don't think it's as good as them. Maybe come back to it though. Spiked boots, they're just a lot worse than Hayabusa boots. There's no way that it's going on the same tier basically, so straight away I'd put it on D probably. It's really janky. You feel like you can't control your character when you're hitting. It's not really worth using damage wise as well. Spartan sandals, similar to the boots, Hayabusa boots, sorry, but they're just kind of worse. You need to have walls or a ledge to even kill monsters at all basically, unless you want to kick them 6 times. And you're not going to always have walls and ledges and stuff, and it's absolutely tragic against bosses. Put in D for now. If I compare it to Morningstar, it's maybe better than Morningstar, so a little bit. If this was in low D and then Morningstar was in high F. Okay, Tentacle. Terrible attack pattern, low damage, clunky to use, but it's not the worst, right? Like, it's not the lowest damage in the world. Like, it's 100% better than these 3. But I do think Hayabusa boots is better than this, but we'll come back to all this at the end and rearrange things. Baseball bat. Really high damage, easy to enable crits, fast attacks, it just kind of carries. Put an S tier. Cursed Sword is kind of just an anomaly, right? It's obviously quite strong, it's used in speedruns, it's used in boss rush, but if you want to get consistent runs and wins, it's probably not the best thing you want to use. I'm just going to put it in this tier, and nothing else is going in this tier basically, I don't think. Alright, Bone. So this is a bit of a strange weapon. It's easy to trigger the crits, but you kind of need to attack 2 times and then another time to trigger your crit. And a lot of time you just kill stuff before you get to the whirlwind. You often need to dodge cancel your crits as well, so you don't even get use out of it a lot of the time. But it's pretty good in general. If you get used to using the weapon, it's quite flexible on biomes and bosses. I would put an A. Torch, not the best damage, but it's easy to burn for oil synergies. It's got a decent attack pattern as well. Put in B. Okay, next is Dagger of Profit. Really short range, not the best damage. You need gold to trigger crits, so it's not going to be up a lot of the time. For bosses, you kind of need to pair it with Shield of Greed. It's just not that good. Put in C tier, and then next, Meat Skewer. You do need to get used to this, but when you do, it is a good weapon. It's got a lot of movement tied to its attacks, so you don't even need to roll it if enemies attacks most of the time. You just attack instead. I think I will put an A for now. Argument for maybe high B, but yeah, I think A for now. Wrenching Whip. Just a clunky weapon, low damage. It jiggles the monsters about, making them unpredictable. It's honestly not the worst though. If you look at D tier, like, then you really get the comparison going, you know. So I think I'll put in C for now. Giantkiller. So you can't backpack this, and you can only crit on bosses. So it's obviously good at what it does, kills bosses, but honestly the damage on bosses is not even that insane, right? So it's quite limited. I'll put in B tier. So as you can see, we're getting like a spread here of like a bell curve of items, which is probably what it should look like. But yeah, let's continue here. So, Frantic Sword. You kind of need to be either below 50% or above 50% to use crits, right? And you want to crit with weapons. But you don't really want to be below 50% health or over 50% malaise. You shouldn't ever aim for that, so it's kind of inconsistent. It's got a good attack pattern, but you don't want to be aiming to crit with this weapon, which makes it not that good. So I'll put in C tier. Oiled Sword. You kind of always want to be critting with this. It's kind of really easy to get crits with it. So it's one of those weapons that's, it's not the best, but since it can crit really easily, then its damage is like kind of okay. I would put in B tier. Handhook, another weapon that's just kind of janky. You can use it, but it's just not consistent. I feel like it's going to get you killed at some point because of how it works. Obviously, you need walls and stuff as well. It struggles on bosses. I would put in D tier. Swiss Sword. It's kind of almost okay, is what I want to say. I'd put in like low B, high C maybe, something like that, you know. It's alright for biomes, but it's not like you can keep your speed buff up all the time for crits. Then it's just bad on bosses, right? I'll put in C tier for now. So, Katana. A lot of people like this weapon, but I don't think it's that good. It's fast, it's quite fun, it's not that high damage, and the crit isn't always that useful. It gets you in a lot of trouble a lot of the time. And you kind of have to set up the crits if you want to use it as well. I would probably put in B still though, just because it's kind of a fast weapon. Its damage is still meh, but yeah. I'll put in B for now. Looking at the C tier, I think it is better than most of them, so. Alucards. I would put this in A tier if it wasn't so clunky. The teleports are weird, it's kind of inconsistent, puts you in a lot of bad situations. It's not the best on bosses, but it's definitely decent, right? I think people think it is better than it is though. I will put in B tier for now, yeah. Flawless, the weapon has a bit of a weird attack pattern. It's got a little bit of a delay in the first attack. I find that it's not that strong either, even when you're getting your crits going. I'd say put in C honestly. I just don't see it. There's an argument for putting in B maybe, but it's not as good as some of the weapons in B. Hayabusa gauntlets. Pretty consistent weapon, it's got a good attack pattern. It's really easy to breach mobs, but of course its crit is kind of meh. But it's just kind of a standard weapon, put in B. Flint, alright, you can do a lot with Flint here. On 5BC you can pre-charge it before mobs teleport, or on any BC you can just drop down from ledges and charge it. Since it has an overhead, it's good with dealing with flyers. It just does high damage without crits as well. The crits are so easy to do as well. It's just a pretty good weapon. Definitely put that in A tier, at least. War Spear, it has decent damage and a big attack range, right? But the hitbox on this I find is pretty weird. And you can't really get crits on bosses either. Does do a decent damage though, so I will put in B. Trident. Alright, there's some pretty bad weapons that people tell me that they like, but I just don't think anybody likes Trident. It's just bad. It's not unusable, right, but it's pretty bad. So we'll put it in D tier. Rhythm and bouzuki. You really need to get used to this weapon. Not just the timing, but timing while attack cancelling, while dodging, stuff like that. Once you figure it out though, it is pretty fun, and it is pretty powerful as well. I would put an A. Flashing fans, not really anything good to say about this. Low damage, even when you kind of proc your crits, which isn't that often. You need to really pay attention if you want to proc these crits on this weapon. And it's got a pretty bad attack pattern too, to be honest. I would put in D tier. Bible, strong against bosses if you get your spinning Bible set up, but it's kind of clunky in biomes. It's not the worst thing in biomes though compared to some of these things, so along with its damage and stuff, I would put in B. Oh, I missed Death Scythe randomly. So, Death Scythe, it just kind of carries a little bit. Doesn't have top end damage, but the ghosts like clear half the game for you. I would put an A tier instantly, really high A tier. I would almost consider putting an S tier. And Wrecking Ball. Absolute torture to use in biomes, right? I mean, I want to clear the game eventually, but with this, it feels like that's never going to happen. Feels like your run's going to take forever. So you're going to take hits when using this, just because of how slow it is. Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to put in D tier. Shovel, just a pretty consistent bonking weapon, decent damage, decent attack pattern. Symmetrical lance, slow, but decent burst damage with each attack. It's kind of easy to one-shot enemies, which is really good in the game. And it's got quite a big melee range as well. Snake fangs, the teleport on this weapon makes dealing with some mobs really easy, like demons or rats. You can just clear them out of the way. Its crit condition gets triggered by the weapon itself as well, which makes it pretty powerful. It has a really good attack pattern, but the weapon can seem weak if you start with it. But yeah, it's pretty good, so I would probably put an A tier. Seismic Strike, it roots, but the Boy's Axe is just kind of better at doing what Seismic Strike does. This weapon kind of doesn't do much damage. It doesn't know what it wants to be, a main weapon or a support weapon. And not the absolute worst thing in the world though. Putting C tier for now. Oven Axe is slow but high damage. Not really much to say except that. Putting C tier is definitely better than like Wrecking Ball. Tombstone. A lot of people kind of like this weapon and I don't understand why. It doesn't have high damage. You cannot crit with it. With the special attack, you need to get all your hits off. Like you need to last hit with it. But it's just not good. I was using it recently and I was really strong and I couldn't even one-shot mobs with it, and it's a slow weapon so you're expecting it to do that much. I would honestly put it in like C or D tier. Is it better than these in D tier? Most likely, yeah. So we'll put it in C for now. Toothpick, some people like Toothpick as well. But effectively trying to get hits off with this and crits off, it's just really annoying. I would be inclined to put in F tier, so that's where I'm going to put it for now. Nutcracker is kind of just like a worse baseball bat. Has decent damage, easy enough to trigger its crit condition. You can get victims slow nearby enemies as well. I would put in maybe B tier though. I don't think it's quite A tier. Balance, but you want to get consistent with using this weapon. You want to get the consistent crits with this. It's pretty good if you can get to the point where you can crit consistently and know that you can do it. But if you aren't landing those crits, it's not that strong. But overall, I would put it in B. Iron Staff. If you want to parry, just use a shield or cocoon. You don't want to be waiting on a parry with your main weapon. pretty consistent weapon. I would put it in D. Machete and pistol. My immediate reaction is to put it like in B or C. Maybe like top C, bottom B. It's kind of clunky, doesn't do the best damage. When you get to the crit portion of the attack, you already want the mob to be dead because you've hit the mob twice at that point. It's alright on bosses, but it still doesn't do that much damage. I think I would put in B though. Maw of the Deep, kind of meh damage, and it's slow. You almost never want to get to the crit portion of the attack, just like machete and pistol, right? Because you want the mobs to be already dead. I'm gonna put this in C tier. It's definitely better than the things in D tier. Gold Digger. So I actually really like this weapon. It's got some good overhead swings, good for dealing with flyers. It's really consistent. The weapon does get slower after each attack with its 3 attack pattern, but luckily the weapon does do good damage with every swing, so it should one-shot a lot of things if you can achieve the crits with its first attack. I would put it in A tier. Broadsword. Crit condition is pretty meh, damage is pretty meh, attack pattern is meh. I'd be fine putting this in low B though, or maybe like high C. It's usable, but there's not much reason to use it over other things. I think it's just kinda where most weapons sit in C tier though, right? So yeah, I'll put it in C tier. Bladed Tonfa. Even when you get used to the attack pattern with Bladed Tonfa, it's kind of inconsistent. Because if you want to kill a mob with the first attack, then you go to lunge again, you instead do the second attack in the combo. So it's not the easiest thing to try and get used to the timing. It's just clunky in general. The damage is decent if you can get your crits off though. I would put in C tier. Shrapnel axes. I like this weapon, but it's just not really that good. The biggest downfall is the low damage of the weapon. It doesn't know if it wants to be ranged or melee. You would probably want to play this with like brutality over tactics, but in a lot of situations using the range portion is the better idea. It is okay though. I will put that in B tier. Alright, so it looks like the next portion of this is all weapons that take up 2 slots. So yeah, I'm going to talk about that with each individual weapon a bit, but in general, weapons that take up 2 slots are very limiting. You can't use a shield and you can't use another offhand weapon, so it limits your ability to get synergies as well if you want to use that offhand weapon. So we'll start with scythe claws here. Even when critting early game, you don't even one-shot things sometimes. The fact that it's so slow also really highlights how bad it is taking up both weapon slots. You don't have another alternative to just fire to finish things off, stuff like that. The aim with this weapon is to try and eventually get like the less scythe to be able to one-shot things without critting for most mobs. But that's kinda, you need to be quite strong to do that. I would probably put this in D tier. Whip sword. So the alternate attack to change weapons is just kind of clunky, and the weapon itself doesn't do the highest amount of damage. I find that in biomes, you kind of just want to use the sword version all the time. The only time you want to use the alternate fire and switch between like the whip and the sword is when you come across an elite. And then on bosses, you obviously want to use the alternate. I think it's okay though. If it was just the sword, like honestly, I would maybe go in A tier, you know, but we'll put this weapon as a whole in B tier. Ferryman's Lantern. Another clunky weapon, takes up 2 weapon slots, slow melee attack. Its ranged attack does do a lot of damage, but it just burns through ammo so quick, which you can't get back without then meleeing monsters again. Probably put in C tier. It's just the classic, why would you take it over other things kind of thing. Personally, I do like the weapon. It's kind of an interesting weapon, it's pretty fun. But yeah, C tier it belongs. Hardlight sword. So this isn't even that bad. It's just that it just uses 2 slots. When I look at B tier, and if I ask if it's better than like Impaler or War Spear, then the answer is probably no. It's just the fact that it takes 2 slots. That's like the worst part. C tier is ice crossbow. So this is kind of a weird one. It's clunky in biomes and it often doesn't even kill things by itself with the fire and then alternate fire combo early game. It can be strong with freeze synergy on the alternate fire, but then on bosses it gets a bit weird. So on bosses you can get some fire and alternate fire combos off, but it's going to be a lot of effort, which is usually just not worth the effort. I'm going to put in C tier for now. Heavy crossbow. Slow to fire, which means in 5 BC your melee is going to go probably quite high early game, unless you get like really lucky with some early mods on it maybe. Also means you can't really deal with multiple mobs at once a lot of the time, and you kind of have to take things one at a time, a bit slower. It does do some decent damage though. Let's put in C tier. Rapier crossbow. The alternate fire of this is kind of what lets it down. Like, I'd rather just have the normal rapier like attack, and the alternate fire is really just not good against bosses. It's kind of convenient sometimes for like biomes, but I'd rather just have a trap to have more consistent damage instead of using alternate fire on bosses. It still does decent damage though. Biomes can be a little bit annoying with it, especially early game, but it does deserve B tier still. Explosive crossbow. It's pretty consistent. It is a slower weapon, which means you need to be ready to kind of cancel your attacks when you need to, but it does AoE damage, does quite a lot of damage in general. Yeah, it's pretty decent. B tier. Again, it takes up 2 slots, right? So I'm really hard pressed to put an A instead. Barrel launcher. If mobs hit this barrel you shoot, it reverses back on yourself and it hits yourself. Does damage in a decent AoE range, right? But it's slow to shoot, doesn't have the highest damage. Its crit condition is pretty bad. Looking at D tier, is it better than them? Put in C for now, maybe? Revise at the end? Maybe. Blowgun. So this is actually, I just ignored this completely. Let's just get this out of the way. Put that in F. So yeah, blowgun. Really high burst damage. You need to get crits off with this weapon though. It does like 9 to 13% more damage with crits. And it kind of suffers from things not having a back, same as some other weapons. Some mobs track you really well as well, so it's pretty difficult to get behind them sometimes. But yeah, has quite a lot of burst damage. Let's put in B tier. Bow and endless quiver. Not much to say about this, it's just kind of a decent bow. I'm just going to put an A tier and then leave it alone. Frost blast. Enables crits for nutcracker and bat, but I'd rather have a boy's axe to probably just root with. The boy's axe is more consistent, it does more damage, doesn't wear off when you hit an enemy, but you can get the 175% freeze affix and use frost blast with it, but that's just kind of a clunky playstyle. I mean, it still is just good by itself though, honestly. It's just a decent overall thing. Even if you don't have anything you're working towards build wise, it's just maybe good to put in your offhand sometimes. Sonic carbine, pretty solid weapon, pierces everything, but it kind of struggles with burst DPS, which is really good in the game. It can breach, and it can clear biomes pretty decent. The boss damage isn't the worst. Maybe you would put an A tier. Yumi, I actually really like Yumi. Some people really don't like it, so it's kind of polarizing a lot of the time, I find. It does clear corridors really well, but it runs out of ammo quick. Isn't the best against bosses, unless you're doing like weird tech stuff where you just want to push the boss back. But yeah, it still is decent though. I would put it in B tier. Hakutos. So this thing does one thing, and it's pretty good at what it does. It's an acrobatic pack weapon basically, so put in B tier. Ice bow, kind of like frost blast, but just a bit worse. I find it is quicker though, so there is like a little thing you can say about that. I guess I'd put in A tier as well. Infantry bow, just kind of a standard weapon. Shoot things in their face until they die kind of thing. good weapon, does good damage. A tier instantly, probably. Killing deck, so this is kind of a strange one. You need to really do the full weapon combo to do a lot of damage with this. Even if you have piercing biomes as well, it's just kind of clunky. You kind of need to get shoots an arrow forward for this weapon, like definitely, to get a bit of burst damage with its attacks. I'd put this in like low B or maybe high C. I think it's going to B though. For now, lightning bolt. This is also kind of an acrobat pack weapon, just like Hakuto's. You can use it in hand. I just find that its potential is better in the backpack. So yeah, I'm just gonna put it in B. Magic bow. It locks you in place for quite a long time. It doesn't have the highest damage. The arrows are slow. I would put this in B or C, like straight away. There's basically nowhere else it's definitely going. But like high C, low B. Yeah, I'll maybe put it in B tier. Magic missiles. So this auto aims, it's really quick, but lacks burst DPS and kind of damage in general in early game. Although it doesn't have the best damage early game though, it does deal with rats and flyers and stuff, and those annoying things, and you can just get out of the way quickly. Probably A tier. Marksman bow. Since you kind of need to be pretty far to crit with this, some biomes and mobs can be pretty rough if this is your only weapon. But you can do a lot of crit damage with it if you use it correctly. People hate on the weapon just because it's not a weapon that does everything, right? But if you use it right, it can do a lot of damage, especially with pierce and stuff. I would put it in B. So money, sure. You're going to waste a lot of money with this. But it does do a lot of damage. The attack pattern's not the best either. It's like, well, not attack pattern, but like the attack on it, the one attack. It does tear through biomes, like with pierce. But yeah, I think I'm going to put in B tier. Multiple knocks. So I think you can do a lot with this weapon. Even without a crit condition, you can put some pretty decent damage with it. I'd say it does struggle early game sometimes with damage. Doesn't have much burst DPS, but still just a good overall weapon. Nerves of Steel. So this is actually one of my favourite weapons, and it is actually, I would say, S tier. It has so much damage on it. It just carries everything. If you have Pierce on it, it's the only thing you need. Like, you don't need any skills or any other weapon. I have used this weapon from the start of the game to like just before the second boss. So a lot of biomes, and it just absolutely carries by itself. If you can get good at doing the consistent crits with it, then it'll really treat you well. Petroglyphs, just like Frantic Sword, you kind of want to be at low HP using this, and it's probably about the same as Frantic Sword, to be honest. It isn't ideal for living, you know, which is what you kind of want to do in this game, even though it's called Dead Cells. But I think it is going in S tier, I mean C tier. It is usable, just not the best. Pyrokinetics. So this weapon kind of has low damage, good range, good attack pattern. It has access to easy crits, it gives you fire. I think it is just kind of a B tier situation here. And this is going to be basically the same Fire Blast. It's just kind of really similar to it. Quick Bow. So this is fast at attacking but pretty low damage, right? You'll want to have good synergies if you want to do anything with this. You want to augment your gameplay as well with things like maybe Hakuto's, turrets, stuff like that to help it along. But yeah, it has such low damage on it. I remember using a 4x quick bow and it still didn't even do that much damage. So C tier it goes. Ice Shards, so obviously it just slows everything all the time. If you use it with a lot of other weapons, right? If you're using two weapons at once, like say you use Ice Shards and Boy's Axe together, then that can be a really like strong combo. Or Ice Shards and Boomerang, something like that. Or even like Ice Shards and a slower weapon. So you can actually get the hit with the slower weapon off, like maybe Oven Axe or something. I think I would put this in A tier. Yeah. Alchemic carbine, you basically only want to use this for synergy, for poison synergy, and there's easier ways to get poison synergy than using a whole weapon slot. Or mutation if it's going in your backpack for acrobatic pack as well. I think I'd put in C tier. I mean, it's not unusable, right? Like, it does something. Hemorrhage, I have no idea why this is in the game. I don't know why anybody would use this. It does bad damage, it's slow, it has ammo, so it can run out. It's ranged, so it kind of wants to be a brutality support weapon for bleed. It's just a mess. I think I'm putting it in F tier. It's just so bad. Electric whip, so I think a lot of people like this, but I have no idea why. It's got really low damage. It's not really that quick enough to be like a support weapon. Like if you were to use a throwable or a boy's axe, you know, you can throw one instantly, and then use your other weapon, your main weapon. But E-whip is like kind of in between a main weapon and a support weapon. It's low damage, it's short range, probably C tier. So Medusa's head is pretty slow to use and it's pretty niche. The best use case for it is like long corridors of monsters, but it's usually just straight up worse than freezing with a frost blast or something like that. You can acrobatic pack it, but it just kind of feels like a waste to do that. I would put in C tier. You could make an argument maybe for B tier, right? But I'll put in C tier for now. Alright, next, we've got some interesting weapons coming up. So Boy's Axe is really, really good. It can give you root synergy, it enables crits for bat. If you use it together with a weapon like Boomerang, and throw them both at the same time, like if you hold to attack, they're called hold to attack builds basically, it's really, really strong. We'll just take Boomerang right now actually, we'll pair it with Boy's Axe kind of thing. If you use these, or even like a Boomerang and a throwing knife, a Boomerang and a cross, any two instant weapons that kind of attack very quickly can do a lot of damage. Throwable object is also going in S tier. This is kind of one item that completely carries the game. It completely shuts down most monsters. It does high damage even by itself. The downside of it is you can't really use it if you're using shields. Like, you have to be a no shield enjoyer for this. You also can't stun a few monsters in the game, and most bosses, but you can shut down the first boss of the game still. You can like just perma stun it with this. It really just tears through biomes though. Just one throwable object per mob is totally enough, and you don't want to waste all your ammo. I'm nearly at the end here, so this is kind of the same as the other things. I've put these all together on purpose. So all these are instant throw-in weapons, like the kunai and the cross, stuff like this. So firebrands, it isn't as good as the Boomerang and Boy's Axe though. It can give you synergies, access to oil and stuff like that, but it doesn't do as much damage. So we'll put that in A. Laser glaive, it's not quite an instant throw weapon. It has a little bit of a throw time, but it's good when it works, but there's so many situations where it's just not good to use. Even when there's a lot of mobs around you, even if things are really clumped up, sometimes it's just not good to use it. The little delay on the weapon attack kind of might catch you out, and you may end up getting hit by a mob instead, so you may need to roll away, and it would have been just better having a quicker weapon. So I think we're going to put it in C tier. It's not like totally unusable, but it's just not the best. Alright, cross. So cross, you can kind of destroy mobs with this if you get the position in perfect. Also, if you have a smoke bomb, you can absolutely destroy mobs with cross completely. But yeah, it can be a little bit clunky sometimes. You do need to get the positioning right, you do need to get used to it. You can use it as like a boomerang as well kind of thing. You can just throw it instantly, hope for the best, and it usually does still do damage to mobs as well. I think I'm putting this in A tier. It's not quite S tier, I don't think. Throwing knife. So this auto aims. It's good for dealing with flying mobs. It procs bleed. Or again, you can use it with like boomerang and stuff like that as well. Throwing knife can actually just carry by itself. If you get like shoots an arrow forward on it, it can do a lot of damage. Don't underestimate it with shoots an arrow forward. It can be like quite weak if it doesn't have any good mods or if you're early game with scrolls and stuff, but overall it is really good. I'm gonna put it in A tier. Throwing axe misses 99% of the time. It's only good against like a couple mobs basically. Like Mamatic, Giant, Dracula Phase 2, and what do these all have in common? They all have massive hitboxes where you can't possibly miss. But yeah, otherwise it's just not hitting anything. F tier definitely. And the last one here, War Javelin. So I kind of use this as just a car. Just use it as straight up transport. It can be good though for clearing in earlier biomes. It just pierces everything. It's good for mowing down stuff like rats and sewers. I would put in B tier. Okay, and just gonna have a quick look over this list here, see if we want to change anything. Alright, let's check here. So, what were the things we were thinking of moving? So, Hayabusa boots, right? C tier. Let's take a look. Compared to the other things in C tier, I think it is better, so it does deserve like, these aren't really in order, but it does deserve like top C tier or B tier. I think I would be more inclined to put in B tier though. Yeah. Next, I kind of want to move Para Launcher. I want to move it from C tier to D. Because thinking about it, yeah, I think that's where it should go. What else? Machete and pistol, right? I think we'll just keep it in B tier. Like, does it deserve C or B tier more? Yeah, I think I'm gonna keep it in B. And then the final thing I was kind of thinking about was Nutcracker. I was like, does it deserve to be A? It does do a lot of damage, but I don't think I want to put it in A. I don't think it quite deserves it. Like, looking at it, is it as good as like Flint? I don't think it quite is. Yeah, it would be maybe like higher B tier, you know, if this was in order, but like, is it better than B tier though? Let's see, is it better than like Bloodsword? Honestly, I don't think so. Yeah, I'm kind of happy with this though. You can see like a good spread at the end. There's obviously like more stuff than anything else in B tier. Then A and C is like spread kind of evenly. And then F and S are kind of similar as well. Thanks guys, I hope you enjoyed this, because I did. It was pretty fun. Try not to take it too seriously, and don't follow this list religiously or anything. I always recommend to try weapons for yourself. Trying out weapons for a longer period of time as well, and it might surprise you if you use them end game versus early game. And also check out my Twitch channel as well for Dead Cells content if you're interested, and until next time.